Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're taking on something that might make some people a little nervous. Grammar.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But don't worry, this isn't going to be like, flashbacks to high school English class or anything like that. It's more about how we can communicate better,
Mm-hmm.
more clearly, more confidently. And that's a skill that can really come in handy no matter what you're doing, whether you're getting ready for like a big presentation or you're trying to write a really important email or even just like everyday conversations. This deep dive is going to give you some tools that you can use right away.
I think it's interesting how we tend to think about grammar as like a set of rules,
Yeah.
but it's actually so much more than that.
Yeah.
It's kind of the structure of how we connect our words and our ideas, and you're doing that right now as you listen to this.
Yeah, you're right. It's like constantly building these little puzzles with our words. And grammar is like the framework that holds everything together.
And speaking of puzzles, I'll admit, there are a few pieces that I still haven't quite figured out. Like I always get mixed up with affect and effect.
Yeah. Or who versus whom. I don't know. I feel like sometimes I'm just walking through a minefield of grammar.
But the good news is you don't have to be a total grammar expert to communicate effectively. The key is to figure out what your own personal grammar gremlins are. Like, where do you personally tend to trip up?
Right.
And then from there, you can come up with some strategies to work on those things.
Okay, I like that. So how do we even start to figure out where our weak spots are? Do we need to like dust off those old grammar textbooks and start memorizing all those rules again?
I mean, textbooks can be helpful, but there are other ways that are maybe a little more fun. One thing you can try is to kind of become a detective with your own writing.
Okay.
So take something you've written recently, maybe an email or a report, and really look closely at the kinds of mistakes you're making. Are you always unsure about where to put commas? Do you mix up your verb tenses?
Yeah.
Those are the clues to what you need to focus on.
So it's like we're doing a forensic analysis of our own writing. Okay, I'm into that. But what if we don't even realize we're making mistakes?
Yeah.
Like there are those sneaky little errors that we just don't even notice.
Yeah. For that, I would suggest rewriting something short, maybe like a news article or a paragraph from a book, and then compare what you wrote to the original. And when you see them side by side, it can really help you pick up on some of those more subtle errors, maybe in your sentence structure or your word order, things you might not have noticed otherwise.
Ah, I see. So it's like we're training our eyes to become more sensitive to the details of grammar, even those little things that we might not consciously think about at first.
Right, and this is where it gets really interesting. There are actually two main reasons why we have trouble with grammar.
Wait, there's more to it than just memorizing a bunch of rules.
Yeah.
Okay, tell me more.
Yeah, the other big reason, and this is a really important one, is what we call function. So it's not just about knowing the rules, it's about understanding why we use certain grammatical structures.
Okay.
For example, you might know how to form the past perfect tense, but you also need to know when and how to use it to get your meaning across.
Oh, function.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
It's like knowing which tool to use for the job. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb, would you?
Exactly. And sometimes even when we do know the rules, we can get tripped up by this when and how part.
Right.
A good example of this is the present perfect tense. A lot of people, even native English speakers, have a hard time with this one.
Oh, the present perfect tense. Yeah, I've definitely had my battles with that one.
For sure. But once you get a handle on its function, it becomes a lot less intimidating. The present perfect tense is all about talking about actions or states that started in the past and continue into the present, or describing experiences without giving a specific time.
Okay.
It's all about that connection between the past and the present.
So it's not just about getting the grammar right. It's about actually using it in a way that helps you communicate what you want to say. This is making me realize that grammar is a lot more powerful than I thought. Like it's almost like a secret code for making your communication more interesting and impactful.
Exactly. And speaking of codes, there's this technique that can really help you internalize these grammar concepts and make them feel more natural. It's called templating.
Templating. Okay, I've heard of that. But it sounds kind of simple. Does it really work?
It is simple, but that's what makes it so great. Templating basically gives you this framework that you can use to build sentences that are grammatically correct without having to get too bogged down in all the rules. It's kind of like having a set of blueprints for different types of sentences. So for example, if you're struggling with the present perfect tense, you could start with a template like, I have never.
So like I could say, I have never been to Antarctica.
Exactly.
Or I have never eaten escargot. See, I feel more confident already.
Right. And the key is to make those templates your own. Connect them to your own life and experiences, because it's so much easier to remember a grammar rule when it's tied to something that's meaningful to you.
This is actually pretty brilliant. It's like turning grammar practice into a creative writing exercise. Way more fun than those boring workbooks. But okay, so we're being all creative and making up sentences, but how do we know if we're actually getting the grammar right?
Good point.
Yeah.
It's always a good idea to have someone check your work, especially when you're first starting out. Maybe a teacher or a tutor, or even just a friend who's good at grammar.
And hey, if you're feeling brave, you can always share your template sentences with us in the comments. We'd love to see what you come up with.
Absolutely. And once you're feeling good about your sentences, you can take things to the next level with a technique that some people might think is a little old school. But trust me, it's super effective flashcards.
Flashcards, seriously. I haven't used those since like elementary school.
Uh-huh. It sounds a little old-fashioned. But there's a good reason why flashcards have been around for so long. It all comes down to this thing called active recall.
Okay, what's that?
It's basically forcing your brain to retrieve information from memory, which is way more effective than just reading something or passively reviewing it. Oh. Like when you have to really think hard to come up with the answer, and then you're like, aha, I got it.
Exactly. And with flashcards, you can create your own using the personalized sentence templates that you've already made.
Yeah.
So you're not just memorizing random rules.
Yeah.
You're actually practicing grammar in action.
So it's like a double whammy. We're using those templates to get the grammar right, and then we're using flashcards to really make it stick. I like it.
And it gets even better. There are all these awesome apps out there now, like Quizlet and Anki. They take flashcards to a whole new level. They use something called spaced repetition.
Spaced repetition. What's that?
It's basically an algorithm that figures out the best times for you to review the material. So you're basically revisiting the information right before you're about to forget it, which helps you remember it better.
Wow. So it's like having a personal grammar tutor in your pocket. Pretty much. And these apps are super customizable too. You can add images and audio recordings, and you can even create your own decks based on specific grammar points that you're working on. So it's like having a grammar learning system that's tailored just for you.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
We've come a long way from those dusty old textbooks, haven't we?
for sure. It's amazing how technology can change the way we learn.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different things today. Let's do a quick recap for our listeners. We started by talking about figuring out your own grammar weaknesses, like the areas where you tend to make mistakes. Then we talked about the idea of function, which is basically understanding not just the rules of grammar, but also why we use those rules. And finally, we talked about how templating and flashcards can be really helpful for putting grammar into practice and making it stick.
Right. And it's important to remember that this isn't about becoming a grammar expert overnight. It's about making progress and enjoying the process of becoming a better communicator.
I love that. It's about progress, not perfection. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something to think about. What's one grammar rule that you'd really like to master? And how could you use some of these techniques that we talked about today to achieve that? Think about it for a minute.
And if you're feeling inspired, share your thoughts with us in the comments below. We'd love to hear what your grammar goals are. It's funny how we often think of grammar as this strict set of rules, but what we've seen today is that it's actually this really dynamic tool that we can use to express ourselves in more powerful ways.
Totally. Grammar isn't about limiting our creativity. It's about giving us the tools to be more precise and nuanced with our language.
It's like having a bigger set of colors to paint with, or more instruments in an orchestra. The more you understand grammar, the more effectively you can create your message.
And the best part is, this journey of learning about grammar never really ends. There's always something new to learn, some new subtlety to discover. It's a lifelong process, and it's so worth it. Because when we master grammar, it gives us this amazing power to connect with others on a deeper level, to share our ideas in a way that's clear and impactful, and to really make our voices heard.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
So to everyone listening out there, I encourage you to really embrace the power of grammar. Don't be afraid of it. See it as something that can help you become a more confident and articulate communicator. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about the progress, the persistence, and the joy of discovering all that language has to offer.
So go out there, experiment, practice, and most importantly, have fun with it. That's it for our deep dive into the world of grammar. We hope you learned some new things and that you're feeling a little more excited about the power of language.
And remember, the learning doesn't stop here. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep those grammar gremlins at bay.
It really is kind of amazing when you think about it.
Yeah.
The power that our words have,
Mm-hmm.
and the better we understand grammar, the more we can harness that power. I don't know. It's like when you're learning to play a musical instrument.
Oh,
Yeah. Like at first it can feel really awkward and you don't know what you're doing.
yeah.
But then the more you practice, the more you start to see all these possibilities. And you can actually start creating something beautiful.
That's a great way to put it. You know, grammar is kind of like the musical notation of language. It's what helps us structure our thoughts and ideas so we can communicate them in a way that's clear and engaging.
And the cool thing is, it's never too late to start learning. No matter where you're at with your grammar, there's always room for improvement, right? Like maybe you've always struggled with commas, or maybe you want to learn how to use semicolons,
Mm.
like a pro assign. Whatever your grammar goals are, there are ways to get there.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to have some fun with it. Language is constantly evolving, and grammar is just a framework for exploring all the possibilities. So play around with different sentence structures, try out new words, and most importantly, find your own voice.
That's so important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, grammar shouldn't be a chore. It should be something that makes you feel more confident and empowered. It's about finding your own style within the structure of language. So to everyone listening, I want to say, embrace the challenge, celebrate your victories, and never stop exploring the world of grammar. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We hope you learned some new things and that you're feeling a little bit more inspired by the power of language.
And remember, this is just the beginning. Keep practicing, keep learning, and keep those grammar gremlins away.